After the emergence of Swerve Scott and his new crew, we are talking stables today, and we have a special guest from the Faction Show, funny enough, to discuss stables from Black history, new, old, present, past, all of that good stuff. We're going to get into it in just a second, so stay tuned. This is WrstlXtra.
Yo, guys, this is WrstlXtra, and I am your boy, A Dazzle, here alongside my tag team partner, Mex. Listen, we're talking factions here, we're talking groups, so we have to add someone to the group. This is the man from the Faction Show, Gerard Bonner. Bro, before you speak, I'm going to do this thing real quick. Story time with A Dazzle. I know you love this. So some people may know, some people may not know that WrstlXtra also goes on a station, internet radio station called Affinity Extra. So Affinity Extra is mainly a gospel radio station. There's also there's music and there's chat, and somehow there's a wrestling show on there as well. And that's us. So there was this guy that I saw ages ago, years before we even started this, and his name was Gerard Bonner. Gerard Bonner has his own station called Bonafide Radio, which is also mainly a Christian station. Funnily enough, this Christian station also had a wrestling show. What? Oh from years ago, and especially when I first had the opportunity to start WrstlXtra, Gerard was one of the first people I wanted to connect with in some way. Mex came along, wouldn't leave me alone, so I thought I might as well put him in there as well. I'm joking. But also as well, even with today, me and Mex have been talking for the last few weeks and saying we need to do something different with the show. Let's throw in a few, special guests, whether that be wrestlers, whether that be hosts. Let's put them in. Of course, we know about, Swerve has a new team, a new faction. So we thought, okay, let's switch up and let's not just talk about what happened this week. Let's also find something to talk a little bit more detail in. So we said, okay, let's talk about factions. On that point, on purpose, I wanted to speak with Gerard Bonner. But here's the joke. He hit me up first. What? So in the words of Montez Ford on Twitter, God is good. Yes. That's all I can say. From here, bro, take the floor. You tell us who you are, what you do, and why you are here.
Well, first of all, man, it is legit my honor to be here. I have watched what you guys have been doing for years now. Some of the best content creation in the internet, period, regardless of genre or anything like that. And then to see your focus specifically on the African-American wrestler, I mean, like, I'm just in awe. So it is an honor to finally, we've been wanting to do something together for years. This is amazing. But for those who don't know me, my name is Gerard Bonner, one of the creators of the show called The Faction, got an internet radio station called Bonafide Radio, and I am a color commentator at Southern Honor Wrestling as well.
Yes.
And just all of those things are just so much fun. But really, I'm pumped to be here with you guys, man. I love the sport of pro wrestling. I love the opportunity to be able to talk about it. And I love that we get to be part of the representation in this sport. So let's have at it, man. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, man, for sure. I'm gonna let Mex actually speak today. I
was just gonna say, we're talking factions and all of this stuff. Gerard didn't even come alone. He's brought his whole crew up in the comments, everything.
Yeah,
Bids, thanks for coming through. Bruce Briggs as well. So this is a guest for the ages here.
Yeah, man, for sure. So let's get right into it. So as we've mentioned a few times already, we see Isaiah Swerve Scott now has a new group behind him. We've seen them kind of in the background when he's done his vignettes in his little studio and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden last week during the Falls Count Anywhere match with Leon Ruff, we saw AJ Francis, the big man AJ Francis, come out, attack Leon Ruff, and then of course Swerve took advantage, won the match, and then we saw Briana, Brandy, and Adonis come out and, you know, just in their face, just like, this is us, this is what we're doing. We are different. Gerard, you go first. How did you see this? What did you feel? What did you think when you saw this group and this whole thing kind of, you know, happen?
It's funny. I first saw AJ Francis, of course, on that new A&E show,
Yes.
WWE's Most Wanted Treasures, and I remember seeing him with a PC shirt on, a shirt from the PC, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I heard he was training to be a wrestler or whatever, and then boom, it was like, whoa! And then you see the other two come out, and honestly, when I saw Briana, which I know she was in some vignettes before. But when I saw her, I immediately got Jade Cargill vibes.
Okay.
And I was like,
someone else has said that.
So I was like, oh, so this is what we're doing. But it feels very natural. It does not feel forced at all. I like this pairing. And again, it's something we've not seen in NXT before. And certainly when we start talking about factions and African-American factions, you rarely see a woman paired with a faction. So this is something that I think could really be great. I'm a big Swerve fan all the way from Lucha days. So for me to see him finally like break out, and he just looks like a natural leader with this group. So to me, it made all the sense in the world. Plus, they've all got music connections, and so I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it.
Yeah, man. I think for me, what's nice is the fact they do have legit music connections. It's not forced. It's not like a John Cena too cool type of scenario. And you know, they are good at what they do as well. Just to give a bit of a background of everyone. So Briana Brandy joined NXT in August 2019. She had a tryout with them. I think it was almost a year, if not almost 2 years before that as well. She's trained in jiu-jitsu. She's even talking of her musical background. She's even toured with Jada Kiss and Soulja Boy in the past as well. So that is on its own is crazy. Of course, we also had Ashanti Adonis. We've seen him on 205 Live. You know, not really had a steady run in 205 at all. It's kind of been up and down and stuff like that. He also came from Maryland Championship Wrestling. Once hold the Rage TV Championship that Leo Rush now holds. So that's a big thing as well, and was also part of a group with I think it is Moses and Khan, who are now with Shane Taylor. So them three were in a group as well. So there's a bit of background. And AJ Francis, former NFL player, played for the Dolphins, the Seahawks, the Patriots, a whole load of teams. And now he's obviously, as Gerard said as well, is the presenter for the A&E show WWE Treasures, if I get it right. Mex, you tell me, like, how are you seeing them going forward? Do you see good things? Do you see it being one of those ones where it just kind of happens and crumbles? Do you see a future in this group?
I do, because it seems that NXT have some stock in Swerve. I was someone that I'd seen his work here and there on the indies before NXT, but wasn't really familiar with him. I think we spoke about some months back that I don't really get his character. In ring is fine down to a T, but character-wise, when he turned heel, I just wasn't really getting it, because they were doing the music stuff along with how he was being presented in the ring and in and around the ring. The way they've brought the faction forward, I think they expertly done that, because everything was on Swerve. We saw them in the vignettes in the back. All these guys that we see come out now, they were in the vignettes. But it's like, oh, they're just his friends making music. Like that's it. And then all of a sudden, you know, they're an army, they're a crew, they're coming out, and once probably in the next few weeks we start getting to know these other characters involved. I think it's gonna be good. Briana, Brandy, I mean, this women's division on NXT is something else, really and truly. So all the best for her, you know, navigating through that. But they may stick her with the guys, you know, just for a bit before she kind of goes off into that division full time. Adonis and AJ Francis could maybe be a little fun tag team. Like you said, Adonis hasn't really found his feet so much just in the cruiserweight division alone, so maybe pairing him up might be good. But it's going to be interesting to see where Swerve can go from here.
Right.
I think he, at this point, he's above the cruiserweight thing just because how they've been handling him. And obviously, Legado del Fantasma is like the faction within that division right now anyway. He's already flirted with the North American Championship scene a couple of times. So it might be good to see him kind of land there, get the belt, and have a little run with the guys behind him. But definitely looks promising.
It should be very interesting. I'm kind of seeing, you know, when we see a new faction, we do this thing straight away where we're like, who's going to be the one that's going to come out on top? Who's going to be the one that's going to get all the accolades eventually, or, you know, I mean, become the star from the group? And I honestly think that it will be Swerve. You know, the rest of them, they're going to do something. They're going to have their little their moments and stuff like that. That I don't doubt that at all. As you said, you know, AJ and Adonis could be a great tag team. The big man, the high flyer, that combination will always work. Briana Brandy can kind of, you know, mess in the women's division. It may be too early to expect anything from her because they're just throwing everyone in this women's division right now, and there's no, I don't think there's a space for her for now. But I do see it, you know, being Swerve coming out on top, and it's a way to push Swerve more than it is to introduce or then, you know, throw the other three in our faces or in front of us. With all that said, do you think in any way this is, and this may be timing, but do you think in any way this is almost a reaction to us now not having the Hurt Business?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
And part of the reason why is because I really feel like NXT, Raw, and SmackDown are three very separate islands.
Very, very true.
And they're not, you know, NXT certainly is not influenced at all by what Raw or SmackDown is doing. So I don't think this is a reactionary move to the Hurt Business. I do think it feels really organic. You know, when you think about putting a faction together, there's always the one super experienced person who ends up being the leader to help bring about new talent. You know, we've seen that with a ton of factions, from the Horsemen to Evolution, etc. Right. We're seeing that here because it's clear your leader is Swerve, right? And then you've got the new talents of AJ and Briana, and then you've got Ashanti, who's like right in the middle, who hasn't had a chance to have that rub yet. So I think all of them have a chance to really become stars, and this ultimately will elevate Swerve. Like we're even seeing with The Way and Johnny Gargano. You know, he was kind of floundering. All of a sudden you get this faction, and now he can defend a championship successfully, you know? So I think this is not a reaction to what they've got going on. I think it is its own separate thing, and it has potential to be really, really big if they do it right.
Yeah. Max, what are you saying?
I think if this was on SmackDown, you could say it's a reaction.
Yeah.
But like Gerard said, like NXT is, you know, completely its own island, so much so that, you know, people that are champions and loved and well looked after NXT, once they go to the main roster, it's like a whole new person, you know, they don't get treated the same. Right. So yeah, I think it's easy to say that, yeah, they're giving us this now because of what they've done with Hurt Business, how they messed up Hurt Business, etc. But yeah, I think it's I trust NXT to, you know, that this isn't the case, sort of thing.
Yeah, very true. I do agree, but I just know that, you know what it is. I know what my followers are like. I know what those comments would be. You know what I mean? Hurt Business is not there. Now we've got this other black faction and whatsoever. Speaking of black factions, let's get into the talk of the classic black faction or the factions of old. Gerard, actually, give me your opinion on how you saw the demise, I guess, of the Hurt Business. So the rise and fall of the Hurt Business. How do you feel about it? How did you feel when it happened? How do you feel about it now? Has that changed?
I was super excited. And before I get into those factions, I got to shout out my own, right? I got to shout out my dudes, Courtney, Brandon Clack, who are hanging out with us. Those are my brothers. I love those guys forever. And shout out my man, Bruce, as well. So here's the deal. The Hurt Business, I thought, was something very special because it's something we didn't see coming, right? And again, a classic move where you take a mid-carder at the time, like Bobby Lashley. You put him with two guys that are they've got potential. You've got the veteran guy in there in Shelton Benjamin. You've got Cedric Alexander. The best he had done was 205 Live. Get the experience factor of MVP. It's the thing we didn't know we needed.
Right.
We got it. They became tag team champions. Then all of a sudden, he's the world champion. And oh my God, like this is like we were literally dancing in the streets because for, there have been very few black factions. There you go, right? We've had very few African-American factions, and I'll run down some history in a little bit, but they're very few. There's never been one that has held all of this gold. So it was a monstrous moment, and one could make the argument about the New Day, and we'll get to that, but this was something super different. To break it apart before they ever got to Mania, this didn't last with the championships for 6 weeks. And now we've got it where not only has there been no replacement for Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander, but now those two have broken up and they fight last night and it's almost a squash. And I'm like, why? So for me, I feel like this was a horrible move. It's been well documented that the locker room didn't like it. Roman Reigns went on Clubhouse and said he didn't like it, but it didn't matter. Vince was just like, this is what I want to do. And so it's problematic to me. And I think it's a larger statement about the problem historically in the sport of pro wrestling when you get more than one African-American strong wrestler together. So they don't mind us. Oh, here we go. They don't mind us laughing and twerking and having pancakes and shooting lightning out of our butt. Like they don't mind any of that. They don't mind us coming out of a cereal box at WrestleMania. Right. But they do mind us being guys who dress in suits. They do mind us being strong. They do mind us being strong-willed. They don't want to see that. And that is a problem for me because it seems like every time we get 2 steps forward, we take 5 steps backwards. And that's why we were all apprehensive at WrestleMania. Like, okay, is Lashley even going to retain? Because you just took his faction away, right? Like you didn't take the faction away from Roman. You didn't take it away from Gargano. You didn't do that. So I just think that this is a problematic move from WWE, which says more about their thought of what we look like together. So even, and I'll say this and I'll shut up. They're okay with us winning singles titles. They're okay with us winning tag titles. But this idea of a power group is something that threatens not just them, but it threatens the larger majority. And they said, let's put the complete squash on this. Now it's as though it didn't even exist.
What's crazy is, we spoke about this for weeks on this show. It was like the topic on the show for a good few weeks, leading up to Mania, from when the Hurt Business broke up, all of that. And now hearing what you're saying, it scares me to think that they gave us the Hurt Business. They gave us them with the WWE Championship, the Raw Tag Team Championships, MVP kind of almost, it felt like MVP was the one making the decisions in the back and stuff like that. But now that you've just said what you said, it's now apparent to me that Vince's plan was to push Lashley and have him win at Mania, but then to have him with then another 2 black guys on the biggest show of the year, still with their tag team championships. Yeah, it would have been meltdown. We would have had the riots at Capitol building in Stamford, Connecticut. Basically.
Think about what we had here. You could argue this was the blackest WrestleMania of all time.
I said that.
You know, I
He
mean,
was.
you had two African American men fighting for the Intercontinental Championship. You had an African American WWE champion beginning and leaving WrestleMania as champion. You had two African American women main eventing for the SmackDown Women's Championship. We hadn't seen it this black before. Oh, and the tag titles for Raw
tag titles as well,
had 3 black men involved in the match. Right? So it's the blackest WrestleMania we've ever seen for the first time that they've been back in front of a crowd in over a year. I suppose some would think we should be satisfied, right? But we're not. And that's the thing. Like, how does all of this play out? And to me, the breakup of the Hurt Business was a massive mistake. It's not like they weren't selling merch. They were selling merch. They were popular. It was everything we wanted to see. The problem was we wanted to see it. He didn't.
Right.
It's a case of it's just too popular. It got over too quickly. They didn't expect it. They didn't plan for it. And it's like, okay, well, we still want Drew to walk out as champion, as we had it was rumored, all year round that Drew was to win in front of the crowd. And it's just at that point, they just knew the emphasis wasn't with Drew. Everything was with Lashley and everything that Lashley and MVP and the other guys were doing. So it's like, we need to nip this in the bud, literally. Like, we need to bring this to a whole thing stop. And these guys weren't faces; they were still heels. But being heel is cool now. Like, we all love the heels over the faces. So yeah, just like you guys have said, it's just the abrupt end very much made it seem. And I'm happy you kind of touched on that, Gerard. Like, okay, we're chucking Shelton and Cedric out, but they did kind of insinuate that there would be a replacement, especially in the first week or there wasn't any replacement. Like, it just turned into these guys, MVP and Lashley. We are now the Hurt Business sort of thing. I'm so happy they went on to WrestleMania and walked out still as champions, but it's kind of a small consolation for the bigger picture of everything great that was happening with the Hurt Business.
Gerard, I'm gonna give you the chance to kind of throw the bit of history that you've got waiting to give us, but also firstly answer the question: why do you think, or what's the difference between the New Day, Kofi Kingston winning WWE Championship, and then Xavier Woods and Big E also holding the SmackDown Tag Team Championships to the Hurt Business? And now there's no Hurt Business, whereas we've had the New Day for like 10 years. It seems like that anyway.
I think one of the differences, and we have had the New Day for an extremely long time in the world of factions, right? Most factions last a year, 2 years tops. The big run for the Four Horsemen lasted 2 years. We're still like living off of the original one, right? The New Day has gone for a long time. And the reason why I think that has happened is because they are the non-threatening versions of us. And that's no knock to them, right? Think about this. When they first got together, they were barely mid-carders and they were given something horrible to do. They got booed, but they were consistent. They had great work in the ring, and then they could make Vince laugh. And at the end of the day, if you can make Vince laugh and put smiles on faces, then of course we want to keep you around. Their merch is amazing. But think about this. Even in this last year, they felt as though, okay, well, we can't have too much power, so let's split them and put half of them on Raw and leave Big E on SmackDown because we want to establish a push for Big E as a singles push. But your singles push for Kofi happened. Yeah, well, your singles push for Kofi happened within the New Day. For me, I feel like New Day has represented a non-threatening version of who we could be. Because here's the thing. You rarely see the angry black man with the New Day. But there's still some stuff that hasn't been explained, even with how great the New Day is. For instance, how Kofi Kingston never got a one-on-one rematch for the WWE Championship after getting squashed in 8 seconds by Brock Lesnar. He had a 6-month title run, gets squashed in 8 seconds, and then is relegated back to the tag team title picture to never talk about this. Now, you can't tell me I get to be the world champion for 6 months. I lose it in 8 seconds, and I have nothing to say about that?
Right.
Come on. So for me, I think that the New Day represented the safest version of us that they could digest. So that's what they did. And they're still cool with it. But even now, the New Day isn't what they were. You know, they are the New Day. They're a fun act. And they're still, you know, the only time we get to see them get serious is when Big E gets serious, you know, and I appreciated some of those serious promos from him. And now what this has done for them is they've used the system so that now they can talk about, you know, Black Lives Matter and things like that. But they still do that in relatively subtle ways on WWE television. So again, I say the New Day got to stay because they were non-threatening versions of us. There was nothing that you could easily tolerate about the Hurt Business. They were in your face. They were strong Black men. They were guys who were muscular. They looked like they could take you out, and they could. That scared people.
Of course. Of course. So let's before we start flipping tables and getting angry.
right.
My blood is boiling as Gerald's speaking. My blood, I'm hot. I need a window. I'm telling you.
Gerard, hit us with some history when it comes to Black factions. We've not had many. We know that we've not had many. Our favorite ones have been the Hurt Business, the New Day, and of course the Nation of Domination. Outside of WWE, we've now got Shane Taylor Promotions.
Yes,
you can kind of argue the Foundation is a faction because, you know, it's half, and then the two that are Black more or less run the show. So you know, for me, that's us kind of pulling on strings to say that's
right. right.
Give us what you've got.
For sure. So what you've mentioned really are 3 or 4 factions, and they are significant for sure. And I had to kind of dig to find this one. But one of the first Black factions is a faction called the Blackbirds. Now, the Blackbirds existed from 1987 to 1989. And part of the reason you probably didn't hear about them is because they were a part of World Class Championship Wrestling, which turned into the USWA, which turned into the CWA and the UWF. Or GWF rather, Global Wrestling Federation. So it consisted of Iceman King Parsons. You had Action Jackson and Brickhouse Brown, and they had a manager named Harold T. Harris. The reason you didn't hear a lot about them, A, they were heels, but B, they weren't super successful. Now, here's the thing. Iceman King Parsons is a legend, a legend that not enough people talk about. You know, one of the first to win a major championship in World Class. He was actually part of the Freebirds at one time. And this faction, the Blackbirds faction, they ended up feuding with the Freebirds and the Von Erichs for a bit. Before, of course, all of that went away. We didn't see a Black faction from there until the Nation of Domination almost 10 years later. So it says a lot. And one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of Black factions is if you go back to the territory days, what happened is there was really only room for one African-American wrestler in the territory. So if you got a second one to come into the territory, now the 2 are fighting for one spot. So the idea that you have 3 in a territory is a lot. And then them working together, no way. And here's what's crazy. You're talking about these Blackbirds who were in the South. So they were in Texas. They were in Tennessee. They were in places that they were not supposed to be cheered, and they weren't. And again, you weren't really allowed to do great things. Think about this too. We saw this, the Ebony Experience, which was the Harlem Heat, ends up debuting, of course, in World Class. But again, you really need 3 people for a faction. So the most you might get in those scenarios is a tag team. So this is why we didn't see a lot of factions for African Americans growing up until really now. It's crazy to think that in the history of pro wrestling, now is the moment where we have the most Black factions. So when I hear people talking about representation and there aren't enough this, we have to understand that for many, many years, there was not allowed to be more than one African-American wrestler in a territory because now you're fighting for the same spot. So it's interesting to me now that if we think about how far behind that is, no wonder they're scared. If you go back, I hear people talk all the time about they love the Attitude Era, right? I don't think people really understood what was happening in the Attitude Era. we hear a lot about, you know, how far over the edge things went sexually, and, you know, the edge was pushed so far when they had the Nation of Domination. Go back on the WWE network and see some of these promos. When Farouk says to Vince McMahon, why have you not had a black man to be the WWE champion? It's like, wait, what? You know, and I mean, they had no problem discussing issues of race, because at that point, none of us were really as conscious to go, wait a minute. So like, if that was given today, fans would be confused, because black fans would naturally cheer. White fans, if you don't cheer, you're in trouble. You understand what I'm saying? So Vince would rather go, nah, let's not do that. So it goes back to what we were talking about with the New Day. Why the New Day has been so successful is because, unfortunately, there are certain, you can never be too black in these scenarios and expect to be successful, which is why a lot of us are surprised by the success of Bianca Belair, if we're completely honest, because Bianca Belair is black. Like blackety black.
But she has kind of toned it down on the main roster.
That is very true.
She had to.
What she was at NXT.
Absolutely. But she had to. Right? That's why I say NXT and the main, whatever they call, I hate calling it the main show, but WWE, NXT, they are two different islands. Triple H gives you the freedom to be who you are. It's a different world with Vince. So the question now becomes, will we get more black factions? I don't know, because I'm watching what's happened with the Hurt Business, how quickly that got squashed. You have to walk a very thin line with an all African American faction. You can't be too urban. For one, because it's a corporate company and they're not thinking about specifically us as a demographic. They're thinking about the others and those folks who are buying merchandise. And will they feel too excluded if there are too many references to certain elements of black culture? So that's why, you know, even when the New Day, which if you think for a while, when they were cutting those promos, they were, you know, they would throw some Cardi B references, they would throw some other, and we'd be like, yes. And some of the announcers would be like, who? Because there's no cultural clue. So this is the tough part about having all African-American factions, is what kind of a line do you walk so that you can be recognizable and palatable to the Caucasian audience, yet still feel as though you can represent the African-American audience well? It's a tough line.
Very true, very true. Gerard, you raised a very good point towards the end of that. Now, you said how you know, Vince and the WWE have to consider the others, those that who are buying the merchandise and all that kind of stuff, buying the tickets, putting their bums on the seats. Mex, do you think that to a point at all that we are almost I kind of almost answered the question just before I'm about to answer it, ask it. But do you think that we also are our own problem? So us not buying merch, us not putting bums on the seats, us not being a demographic that WWE generally, as a with the business mind, cares about, because we don't bring a business to them.
I guess so. Although I guess it's kind of hard to quantify. Like, we see like the rumors of this whole NXT Mexico about to maybe happen, and NXT Japan, and we see all the work and the energy they're putting in with India and the Superstar Spectacle and all these other kind of shows, Saudi and everything. But I guess it's unless they do like an NXT Africa, I don't know how they can really quantify you know, black people support and stuff like that. And yes, you know, I guess it doesn't take a genius to kind of work out that we probably are the smallest demographic when it comes to buying the merch and buying the tickets and all of that kind of stuff. I can't remember. I think it was the boys from Wrestlings. They told me they went to a SmackDown in the UK. I think it might have been in Manchester or somewhere. And like, there was no black people. Like,
Wow.
it was like
I was there in the seats.
Depending which one you went to.
I looked around and literally like, nah, trust me, it was probably like about 2% of the place.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, from a business point of view, why would you look at these guys and think, okay, I need to cater to them? I think it was that Superstar Spectacle they did back in February or so. They said 20 million homes in India were tuned in watching that. Like Raw would die for those kind of numbers and all of that kind of stuff. You see what I mean? So when you see Jinder Mahal get made WWE champion and they're recruiting people in from India, it's for a reason. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah, we, like you're saying, we do need to maybe do better in terms of showing our support and things like that, so that we can almost say like, "Hi Vince, I'm here as well," you know, so I can be remembered.
Cool. Moving on from the subject just a little bit. Let's talk about some of the things that are coming up in wrestling. We know that WrestleMania Backlash. I hate that name. I want to just call it Backlash. We know that our favorite WWE champion, Bobby Lashley, is about to go toe-to-toe with both Drew McIntyre and Braun Strowman. Gerard, do you see him walking out as champion? And if so, what is then next for Bobby Lashley?
You know, before Raw last night, I wasn't sure if he would leave as champion because for me, it didn't make sense that he would fight each of his opponents going into the match. Like, why are we going to watch this? Particularly if you're going to beat both of them. There was some weird outside interference. Braun ended up looking like the strong man last night, which gave me hope. It gave me hope. So I'm going to go out on a limb, and I think that Lashley is going to retain. I think it's a move that makes sense because if you strip, this is the weird part, you strip away the Hurt Business and you have Lashley standing on his own. Lashley is what Vince likes. He is. He's the muscle-bound champion of old who is, a prize fighter. He's hard to beat. I don't want to call him a black Brock Lesnar, but I mean, he is that guy. And really, one of the things that they say from a psychological standpoint in wrestling is that people would rather see good guys chase an evil champion versus evil guys chase a good champion.
Right.
So in that case, to me, it makes sense that Lashley would retain the championship here. I have to say that no, I don't see Braun Strowman as WWE champion. I think that time has come and gone. And I think that his Universal title reign showed us that perhaps his reign was way too late because it just fell flat when it happened last year.
Right.
I feel like Drew, I think there's somebody they want Drew to be that he's not fully yet. I think they think Drew is this next big megastar, but I don't see Drew as that way. I see Drew as an aggressive guy, but I think his time has come and gone. I think this is really Lashley's time for a while. So yeah, I see Lashley retaining.
Mix, your take?
I see Lashley retaining, but I'm not sure if I see him. It's his time.
Right.
He's doing very well right now. MVP's there, all the ingredients, everything's falling into place. I do think there's a lack of top level competitors on Raw that could trouble Lashley, and that's why he may hold the belt for longer. Loved what you said there with Drew McIntyre, because I think that's the case as well. I think they want him to be the next Cena or something like that, but he isn't there. I think Drew's one of these guys that, in the days where we had maybe like a Kurt Angle, a Batista, and there was quite a few people at the top. He is one of many, but I don't think he is the person sort of thing. Okay. So Bobby Lashley, I think, will retain. They done, the classic wrestling thing where, Braun Strowman stands tall. The math says that he's gonna get pinned on Sunday, so exactly. I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all.
Exactly.
Bobby Lashley retains. I think maybe they're positioning Jinder to go up against Bobby Lashley next, and then maybe Jinder will will crumble against Bobby Lashley and fall down to maybe the inevitable Drew storyline that I guess some of us have been waiting for a bit. But yeah, I guess the ride continues with Bobby Lashley until there's probably a more credible challenger.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty. There's really no one apart from, for me, it would only be Braun or Drew that would make any level of sense in beating Lashley. After this match, I'm kind of like, okay, what's going to happen after this? They can't continue with Drew. If Drew doesn't win, there's no way they can continue with Drew. It just would make no sense. And then Braun, Gerard, you're correct. That whole Braun, the monster strongman, that got killed years ago, and it's a real shame, because for me, even now, I feel he's actually better.
Yeah,
I actually think he's actually better in his look, in what he's doing, in his presentation. Everything is actually better, but I know that he's not got the leadership behind him. Basically, he's not got Vince and all the rest of it behind him to push him that far to a credible type of champion. It might happen, and then he'll lose it again in a few weeks if it does.
Right.
But with Lashley himself, I do see it as it is his time, but almost by accident, because there's not really anyone else. If it was going to happen, it would have been Drew. But because that's not happened, you kind of like, well, there's no one else, so we might as well just leave it on him for a bit, and then see who we can either build up or see who comes next and what we can think of. And Jason Jordan's probably in the back trying to work out some creative stuff and whatnot. So I don't know. It's a weird place. Me and Mex have been struggling for the last 3 weeks to even talk about wrestling, because we're kind of like, what's going on right now? Like since Mania, it's like it's just died. Everyone's creative minds have just disappeared, and they just don't know what to do next. It's crazy. But moving on again to less WWE. Let's move over the pond across the US, state of Florida, to Jacksonville for AEW. Now, I know there are a few of your friends, Gerard, from Southern Honor Wrestling, who are over there doing their thing. Guys like you've got Sean Dean, you've got Lee Johnson, David Ali showed up. And there's so many that have come from Southern Honor Wrestling. We saw, I haven't seen the match yet myself, but we saw Lee Johnson versus David Ali. I know that there's an amazing level of history between those two from way back in Atlanta, probably about maybe 3 years ago, when I actually really started doing the page. David Ali was one of the first indie stars that I really had my eyes on. So Lee Johnson and David Ali have got an amazing history, and in Southern Honor Wrestling as well, they were part of a faction.
Absolutely, they were.
There's the other connection there. I'm good at
it. You're very good at this.
So
a primarily black faction too.
Yeah, it was. The only person that wasn't black was
Danny Jordan. Alan Angels and Danny Jordan.
Yeah. Alan Angels, Danny Jordan. So give me like. In terms of that match, as much as it was on Dark Elevation, and don't get me started on that show or Dark, because anyway, in terms of that match, how does it feel for you to know them personally, to kind of see them during your time in Southern Honor Wrestling, to then have that match, especially with Lee Johnson being signed to AEW? Just give me your reaction to that match alone, to be honest.
It's really quite amazing to watch this journey. The pandemic was very difficult for a lot of people in this sport, but it proved to be a great move for some of the folks here in Southern Honor Wrestling, as they were able to get opportunities on the AEW stage because they were available. And that allowed them to really be in front of the world, which I thought is amazing. And so when you look at a Lee Johnson and a David Ali, who ironically last month, Lee Johnson had his final independent match in Southern Honor. And it was pretty amazing to call that. But the history between David Ali and Lee Johnson, both of them being a part of the new era for quite some time. Ali has got more experience than Lee Johnson. Of course, Lee gets signed. That's a whole thing. David Ali's now your Southern Honor champion. It's really crazy to see that dynamic between those two, and to see them get to do that is incredible. So as I get to watch the talent that we've got to call matches for, and now they're on these other stages. It's a pretty amazing feeling to watch. And so, yeah, I am excited. I love it. It's probably the only time you'll ever publicly hear me say that I like something about David Ali. He knows why. So, but I am wildly proud of those folks who are holding our banner, getting to perform in spaces like AEW. So it's incredible. It is incredible to watch, and you just never know where our talent will show up. Most people don't realize that Austin Theory spent some time in Southern Honor Wrestling as well. So it's pretty cool just to see how what we're doing is influencing both companies right now.
That's amazing. That's amazing to be a part of that as well. To know that, you know, you've, as you said, called matches, know them personally, stuff like that. I mean, I get excited just at the fact that I've shared DM messages with a few of them. So for you to know them personally is crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. Let us move on now to the most important list in wrestling.
Yes.
The Top Power 10. Just dropped today. Funnily enough, my contributors for this month was Gerard Bonner and a guy called Mex, the hardest working journalist in the UK, most definitely.
I'm trying.
He's getting there. He's getting there. He's trying to take my spot. He's getting there. He's getting there. So we saw, you know, the list just changed. As I mentioned earlier, wrestling's just been a little bit different in, you know, since Mania. So the list was very different. We saw so many new names coming in there. But I'm gonna run through the first 5 from 10. So from 10, we had Zeda Ramirez. Of course, she's been thrown in there because she had that massive debut singles win over Toni Storm. She had a match with the new Japanese Sarai as well, which was a good match. Unfortunately, she lost, but you know, we've seen her do her thing. That shooting star press, we were talking about it last week on this show. Just phenomenal, amazing stuff. At number 9 is Ember Moon. Ember Moon is in there because she won the NXT Women's Tag Team Championship alongside Shotzi Blackheart. They defended it a couple of times as well. They had a good run with that. Unfortunately, came to an end last week, but you know, that's in May, so we can kind of like
right.
it wasn't there. Rich Swann came in at number 8. Mainly because of the magnitude or the magnitude it should have been.
Right.
Don't get me started again. The magnitude it should have been between Rich Swann as the Impact World Champion and Kenny Omega as the AEW champion versus champion. Winner takes all. We all knew what the outcome was going to be. We all knew what was going to happen afterwards, and that's exactly what's happened. And let's not talk about that anymore. Number 7 was Almost. Almost, of course, debuted at WrestleMania and won the Raw Tag Team Championships on his debut. That accolade is phenomenal. It's absolutely massive. Unfortunately, obviously, him and AJ Styles were more or less like non-existent up until last week. So I guess that's probably the reason why he's not higher up the list. But that was Almost. At number 6, Anthony Ogogo. That guy right now, he's being groomed to be this crazy heel. It's mad. It's mad. He takes out Billy Gunn. He takes out Lee Johnson and Billy Gunn the following week, and he just took out Cody Rhodes.
Yeah,
and even draped the Union Jack over him. And now I know Mex isn't the biggest fan of the Union Jack, flying around the Union Jack, but you know what? He's the governor. So, you have to go with the whole thing. He's got the little beret, the slacks, everything, man. He's going for it, man. And I'm liking what they're doing with Ogogo. I was very unsure of how he was going to be used, especially when he first started started wrestling. Even when we first saw him and he was doing his commentary stuff and like, okay, how's this going to work? But I think what they've done with him so far, it's the right idea. Where it goes, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. Moving on to the top 5, we'll talk about these guys just a little bit more. So top 5, at number 5 is Isaiah Swerve Scott. Now, biggest reason why he's in here, he had a great showing at NXT Stand and Deliver at Takeover. I think he was like the runner-up in that gauntlet match. Leading up to that and up to last week as well, he's had this great feud with Leon Ruff. It's been amazing. Both guys have been great, but because Isaiah's come out on top, he takes this. Now, we've spoken about Isaiah Swerve Scott a little bit already, but Mex, you give me again, like what do you see happening? I know you put him on your list as well, actually. What do you see happening with Scott, and why do you think for you he was on your list?
It's just how they're, looking after him, how they're treating him. When he's not in the ring, he's got the vignettes and, at the forefront of the memory. They've made him look, like a credible star within that mid card, possibly pushing on to the upper mid card, despite it being a bit crowded right now. Even through doing that, they haven't forgotten Leon Ruff, who was always kind of presented to us as this kind of puny little guy. But Leon Ruff has come with the fire as well, and Swerve has had to take a step back at sometimes, I think we said this some months ago with this whole idea of this second NXT show apparently on the horizon. I would bet money that Swerve and Leon Ruff are going to be right at the top of the card of this possible second show. Like they've got a position some guys as whatever this, the main NXT, and there's going to be some guys that are going to have to go over to that show and really establish it. And I think Swerve with the, with his experience in the indies and stuff and Evolve, and this is going to be NXT Evolve, I think they said it only makes sense that he's going to be maybe a big star over there.
Yeah, man, for sure. At number 4 we have Sasha Banks. Of course, she was part of that very important, what I call the most important match in WWE history, especially when it comes to representation, against Bianca Belair. Of course, she walked in as the SmackDown Women's Champion, but walked out with no belt. But yet, we all know that she just looked absolutely amazing in the ring. She did what she needed to do and was completely gracious as a loser. Gerard, how did you see? We saw that little footage of her smiling after the match, even after getting that massive whip and the big scar on the side of her. Yeah, I was smiling after that, I'll tell you. But how do you see Sasha Banks in that moment? What did you think?
That whole exchange reminded me of Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior. Yes, I mentioned Hogan. Sorry, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, WrestleMania 6. Right. The whole idea is, how do you lose and get elevated? Right. That's what happened to Sasha Banks. Right. Ultimate Warrior leaves with both titles. Hogan leaves and they call him immortal. Right. Sasha Banks loses the championship. So Bianca steps up to being the SmackDown Women's Champion, her first title in WWE. Sasha is now elevated to the conversation we only held for Charlotte. Sasha becomes that person where we go, because, for years we said Sasha was the perfect dance partner to Charlotte, and Charlotte was the one we always called the one. Now we clearly recognize, no, Sasha's the one. And why this really ended up being more important is, think about this. This is the first WrestleMania since 32 where you only had one of the 4 horsewomen represented. There was no Charlotte. There was no Bayley. There was no Becky. The only person representing the horsewomen was Sasha. Wow. That's a major thing when you think about that, right? Sasha held it down in the main event of WrestleMania and did the honorable thing, said, we're going to let the business live for another few years by elevating Bianca Belair. We all left WrestleMania forgetting all of the crazy things we might have heard about Sasha before and going, you know what? Sasha really is the great. And then our minds went back to NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, how Sasha made Bayley. And then we start realizing, maybe Sasha made Charlotte as well.
Come on.
So the reality of it is, Sasha ends up being elevated to this place. And here's the crazy part. She's only been on WWE television one time since Mania. And that was an interview where she uttered one word.
Yep.
And we're still talking about Sasha. So it says a whole lot to me.
Level.
Yeah.
Exactly. She is at GOAT level. And as much as they're pushing Charlotte down our throats right now, all we're still talking about is Sasha. So she absolutely,
very true.
On my list, she was even higher than 4. She is really incredible. And I think when we see the Ultimate Sasha and Bianca rematch, it's going to be special.
For sure. In at number 3, this was a little bit of a surprise for me, but when I stopped to think, I was like, it makes complete sense. Number 3, Apollo Crews. He beat Big E at Mania for the Intercontinental Championship and has also successfully defended against Big E and Kevin Owens. That's no small feat on paper, and even with the matches that they had, there were still good matches, great shows, all the rest of it. And as much as, we have the whole heel thing with Commander Aziz and he's been the distraction and all that kind of stuff, at the end of the day, on the record books, Apollo won. Mex, we have been talking, give me your take on your fellow Nigerian brother and how you see him being at number 3 and what's been different about him, obviously since, he's changed his attitude and stuff like that, and his accent and everything else.
Man, I am so impressed with my brother Apollo Crews. I'm telling you, like he's so impressing me and our people back home. I'm telling you. You know what? Like, he's just done everything that's been required of him. He won the match he had to win at WrestleMania, because otherwise we would have been looking at each other like, what's going on?
Right.
And it's just been seamless since then. He comes out, he does what he needs to do. He's got the muscle now with him, so when he does have to act, he does that. Or when the Commander Aziz gets involved, he gets involved. I just think everything has just been as it has to be. He's a trademark mid-card heel champion, ticking all the right boxes. They just have to keep feeding him, good feuds. I think the Big E thing should be done by now.
Right.
And then, just let him build his own star. How they're going to build Big E into this singles push, we're yet to still see. But, he's not missed a step. Even with the whole gimmick that we've spoken at length, should he be doing this? Shouldn't he? Is it working or not? He's just giving it his all, and you can see it's coming off.
Yeah, man. We've said it so many times on here, and the stuff is, he as you just said, he's done everything he's needed to do. The whole gimmick change, attitude, everything has been great. It literally is just that accent. Everything else is perfect. Everything is absolutely perfect. Just that little accent. But he got in at number 3. That's no small feat. Number 2 is Bobby Lashley. Of course, he came in to WrestleMania 37 as the WWE champion and shocked the world, especially me and Mex. I think we're still picking up our jaws. He walked out of WrestleMania as the WWE champion as well. He's also, still shown his dominance in beating Braun Strowman and Riddle, both in non-title matches, but at the same time, he destroyed Riddle and, somehow beat Braun Strowman as much as, Drew kind of got the last laugh in all of it. Gerard, just give me your take on Lashley. We've mentioned that, we think it's his time now, and, whether by accident or by purpose, but just how long do you think it's going to last?
I don't know how long it'll last. I don't know how long it'll last, but I do think I think we're not done with it at all. I think he did more than just make history. And, for all of the history that we've talked about, and we will talk about with who's at number 1, the reality of it is Lashley made history at WrestleMania as well. He's the first African-American to walk in as WWE champion and walk out. The Rock had walked in before as WWE champion, but never walked out as WWE champion. That cannot be overstated. And the fact that ended up being the first WWE match in front of fans in over a year is a massive statement. Major statement. And here's the thing that I think people forget about with Lashley. Lashley is not just a believable black WWE champion. He is a believable WWE champion, period. So that makes a world of difference for him. Him beating Drew McIntyre when you could argue Lashley was the underdog in that match was huge. It was huge. And what he has done since then, he has been a dominant champion. There has been no sign of weakness in Bobby Lashley. So I think this is going to go on for a while. To your point, guys, I don't see anybody beating him anytime soon. The only thing I think that could possibly happen is very, very soon there should probably be a draft. And if there is a draft and they shake things up, things could get interesting. But right now, I don't see anybody beating him anytime soon. So I think we're going to be hearing the Lashley chant for quite some time. Shout out.
Very true. And then, you know what? I didn't even think about that whole possible draft thing. You know, that's interesting. Going to number one, and let's do this very quickly. We've already run out of time, but it doesn't matter. I'll sweet talk the station manager, and she'll probably let me have another minute or something. Number one is Bianca Belair. Of course, we know she was the one that came out on top of the most important match in WWE history. Beating Sasha Banks. Of course, we've just given Sasha all these accolades, and now for Bianca Belair to beat her, that was a massive one. Mex, give me your take on what's happened on that moment, and also what's happened with Bianca since. I know you're not the biggest fan of what has happened since Mania, so give me your take very quickly.
She's just, just a star girl right now, isn't it? Like, just everything she's been doing, everything she's been involved in. They've given her great runs in Royal Rumbles in consecutive years. She won the Royal Rumble. The build towards Mania wasn't great, but we clamored, we asked, give us the main event because they're gonna deliver. My gosh, did they deliver? I'm still calling it the greatest women's WrestleMania match I've ever seen.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, it's just like we spoke about just how she in her first immediate interview on the bump, I don't know how many people saw this. She didn't know how to hold the belt. It was all over the place. Like, she was fiddling with it. Like, it's for me, that was just such a nice thing to see, because this isn't someone that's come up with a wrestling background or anything like that. She's learned this because she's good at it. She's entered this, and she's just excelling in every single thing that she does. Let the stories on SmackDown just gel, become a bit better. Let's see some other sides of her and less of the I'm just happy to be here, I'm the champ sort of thing. But I'm definitely all in. And, like Gerard said earlier, whenever we're going to get this Sasha Bianca rematch, it's going to be something.
Yeah, man, for sure. Folks, as I said about 5 minutes ago, we've run out of time. So, folks, this has been WrstlXtra with me, a Dazzle from Black Wrestling Alliance. Of course, you can follow me on Instagram, Black Wrestling Alliance, with my boy Mex, the WrestleManiac. You are obviously watching on the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel and listening on affinityextra.com. Gerard, tell the people where they can find you and follow you.
Absolutely. You can follow us at The Faction Show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can follow me personally at Bonnerfide, BONNERFIDE, on all the socials.
Brilliant stuff, folks. This has been WrstlXtra, and we've got to go very quickly because my chicken's probably burnt and the station manager's probably telling me off already. Well, folks, we're gone. Thanks for being here. See you later.
See you later, guys.